Hello, San Angelo, and welcome to the Live Daily News Show. I'm James Bouligny.
And I'm Tessa Koskovich.
In news today, Big Spring police need help identifying an assault and vandalism suspects.
And a local coach has taken another job in East Texas.
For our interview today, Joe Hyde sat down with Congressman August Pfluger and talked about their time in the Air Force and what young men and young women can do if they choose to go into the Air Force.
We're going to change it up a bit today. We'll read the news first and then get into our interview as it is a Joe Hyde special. You guys all know how long they can run sometimes, but it's interesting. So if you do stay, it'll be worth it.
There's some cool war stories in there.
Now let's hear a word from Jim Bass.
Right now at Jim Bass, scan our QR code and find great deals on cars and trucks. Right now, get a brand new 2024 Nissan Sentra for just $299 per month. That's right, just $299 per month.
You can only get deals like this at Jim Bass Nissan, Houston Hardin Road, or 24/7 at bassbutts.com, or you can use our QR code.
Into the news, Big Spring Police and Howard County Crime Stoppers are seeking the public's help to identifying suspects in two separate January incidents caught on surveillance video. One was vandalism that occurred on January 19th on South Birdwell Lane, where three people caused about $1,000 in damages by throwing rocks at a building.
The other was an assault by a group of people that was reported on January 25th on East 3rd Street. It showed multiple individuals attacking a man, including one suspect described as wearing glasses, a black jacket, and light-colored jeans. It is no longer January 25th, but maybe you've seen him around. No arrests have been made, and anyone with information is encouraged to contact Crime Stoppers anonymously.
And Coach Tanner Teal, who led Grape Creek to its first ever playoff win and most successful season in program history last year, has accepted a new position as head coach and athletic director at White Oak, with his final day at Grape Creek being set for January 30th.
Teal stabilized the long-struggling Eagles program during his 8-year tenure, highlighted by 4 playoff appearances, a district title, and a 7-5 record with a by-district championship last season. In a statement, Teal thanked the Grape Creek community and said family ties to White Oak ultimately made the move the best decision for his family.
I talked to Coach Teal today. First off, he's always been awesome. He's always brought us, hats and shirts and everything, and he's just been a really good coach to work with. He's been really cool, and yeah, he said it was just the best move for him, and
good for him. There's room to grow, I'm sure.
Congratulations, Coach Teal. On East Texas, it's a little bit easier to get, noticed and everything.
It is.
Because West Texas.
Unfortunately, it's in East Texas, but.
West Texas, it's tougher to get noticed and stuff for your athletic abilities and everything. We're trying to change that here. After this word from Jay Chandler, we'll get into some more stories with Joe Hyde and Congressman August Pfluger.
It's hard to believe how reckless some people can be and how hard they fight against real victims. You need a partner who consistently beats the giants and who will never, ever flinch.
Well, hello, welcome to the show. I'm Joe Hyde, publisher of San Angelo Live. I am with my good friend and fellow combat warrior, August Pfluger. He's our congressman for Congressional District 11. With all the politics getting so toxic and things like that, we've been wanting to do this a while. And August and I both served in the United States Air Force. We're both pilots in the Air Force, both combat pilots in the Air Force. And we decided, a year and a half ago that we would do this show and not talk politics. We just talk about flying and give us some flying stories and some combat stories and kind of talk about why we did it. And my thought was, if someone is at Central High School, Lakeview High School, Wall High School, Cristoval High School, any of the high schools in the area, and they were wanting to serve their country, how did we get prepared to do it? And, how much fun we had. We won't talk too much about all the beer we drank, but, August and I have two different perspectives in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. I was a bomber pilot. August was a fighter pilot. And the difference is a bomber has more people on it than a fighter. And fighters are generally kind of like they're combat support. They just fly, bore holes in the sky, waiting for someone to come challenge them. But August, tell me what airframes you flew first.
Well, it's great to be with you. You're right. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah.
And to get away from a political talk and to have, something that unites our country like the military can do,
Right.
should do, and I think is doing, is really great. So thank you for having this discussion. At some point, I want to answer your very first question about like the Central, Lakeview, Christoval, Wall kids that want to go into the military. What should they do? I do want to, talk about, appointments to the service academies
Right.
and things
And
like
you're
that.
responsible for that.
Yes.
And also, I can give you perspective because I went to Texas A&M. August went to the Air Force Academy. So, and I actually, we're going to get into the combat story because we got to get the attention first, right?
Right.
But at a certain point in high school, maybe it was late junior high, middle school, I had to make a decision for myself that I wanted to do this because they don't just take any ragamuffin into the Air Force to be a pilot. I mean, you can't be, crazy. You can't do drugs. You can't be a party animal. You have to concentrate on your studies. You have to graduate near the top of your class. You have to make a decision at an early age, I think.
That's right.
The switch has to come on.
Yeah.
That you want to do this. And it has to be, I think you have to do it before your freshman year in high school.
It's right around that time. You're right. You have to be focused. You know there's a goal you want to achieve, and so athletically, academically, all of the things that you do leadership wise, community service, those things they matter.
Right.
But you have to focus your attention on. I want to do this and achieve this. So what are the steps that I need to take?
Right.
And it's not overnight. And I've seen some kids that start, maybe junior year. That's about kind of the, without having a major delay. That's about the last
last chance. Yeah.
If you want to go to Service Academy especially. And
now I wanted to go. I thought about the Service Academy, but my issue was my lineage was Aggie, so I had to go to A&M, and I visited A&M when I was a freshman in high school. And I fell in love with the place. Of course, this is back in the 1980s, and A&M was very much like ASU is today. It was a teaching university, smaller, and it was kind of College Station was still out in the country. It felt like a long jog from Houston when I had to drive up there with there was a guy that was in the Aggie band, and he recruited me, and he
I love that.
Let me stay with the band for a night, and I said, man, this is what I want to do.
Well, you know what George Patton said about West Point and A&M. He said, give me a bunch of West Point cadets and I'll win a battle. Give me a bunch of Texas Aggies and I'll win a war.
There you go.
Now I can say that because West Point is a mortal enemy of the Air Force Academy.
Army versus Air Force.
So of course A&M is better.
All right, let's skip ahead.
Sure.
And let's talk about some things. I was probably 5 years ahead of you, maybe 10. I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 10 years ahead of you. So I saw a little bit of stuff before you saw it, but you also saw a lot of the action that I didn't see because I was an instructor pilot, in the last days. But the Iraq, Afghanistan wars were big in our career in the military. When you deployed somewhere, I guess, in Saudi Arabia,
The Middle East and the UAE.
UAE, okay. And when you deployed, what did your wife say?
Well, it was I deployed as a squadron commander, and most deployments were 6 months. Mine was a year.
Wow.
And that wasn't the first deployment. I'd gone on multiple deployments to the Pacific, North Korea, acting up, China. I mean, things that most people don't see in the news. We had done multiple of those, but yeah, my wife was obviously not thrilled about being a single parent with 3 young girls. I think our girls were probably 10, 7, and 2 at the time,
right.
Or maybe even a little bit younger. So she wasn't thrilled about it. She understood, but it was the height of the ISIS war.
Okay.
So politically popular, a lot of support around the world, a lot of countries that participated. It was meaningful because how
And Trump was president.
Barack Obama was president.
Barack Obama
and
was
then
president.
Trump became president during my deployment. Halfway through, he became
really?
president. Yeah.
Okay.
So and that's it. I can talk. I know we're not talking politics, but I can talk a few politics on that. But
from a perspective of a warfighter.
Of a warfighter with a commander in chief.
Yeah.
So
yeah. My first time deploying was Desert Storm. And they came in, the squadron commander came in there and knocked on, we were mission planning for a sortie the next day. And he comes in there and goes, "You guys go home. You guys are leaving tomorrow." And what we had to do is go to Diego Garcia.
Wow.
And Diego Garcia is this island that's like 10 degrees south of the equator, due south of India, owned by the Brits. And we're not supposed to talk politics, but the Brits are trying to give it away today, to a Chinese affiliated nationality, I think. But, it's basically Diego Garcia is the mouth of a volcano with a big old long B-52, B-1, B-2 runway on it. And they just, in fact, when I was stationed in Guam, that was my first assignment, we opened up what they called the Strategic Air Command Center, which was all these buildings with, mission planning rooms and, command posts and stuff like that. And all that stuff was used during Desert Storm. I mean, they built it in anticipation of that. But when I went home, and I think we didn't have any kids at the time. And I said, well, I'm going tomorrow. And, of course, the war has already started by the time I'm getting, I was an H model guy, which B-52s have H models and G models back then. So I had to go back to the G model because I started out in the G model, went to the H model, and had to go back to G model. And so I think she was really upset. I mean, I think she cried. Because at the time, we didn't know if we were going to get back.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
Yeah, a lot of
uncertainty. Because this is the first time that we had a major military action flying wise, war since Vietnam, really. And so all you remember when I was going in the Air, when I was a lieutenant and a young captain in the Air Force, was all the Vietnam guys were lieutenant colonels and colonels. And they talk about how terrible it was back during the 70s, But anyway, that was the first time I went, and I just remember getting over there, and once you're in the groove, it's like the training kicks in.
The training kicks in, and for me, it was I deployed to command the squadron that was there. So mine was a buildup. I knew that I had been selected to go command a combat squadron, which was a big honor to do that, and especially during a conflict where ISIS was so hated around the world, their atrocities were, it was horrible.
And what airplane was this? F-22?
It was in the F-22. Yeah, okay. And the command I had was basically to run a lot of the airfield, the weapons operations, the planning for the daily missions that we were doing, interaction with the host nation, which ran the airfield, and we had to, you had to get permission to take off with certain different munitions, and we had 20 different types of airplanes on the ramp.
Wow.
I mean, it was totally full. Several nationalities, the French, the Brits, a couple of North African countries, but people that all were operating against ISIS. So we had some buildup, but it was a pretty tense time because, remember as the war started in 2014, then I deployed in 2016, remember the the Jordanian pilot that was burned in a cage, that was shot down in Syria. So I knew that I'd be flying combat missions in Iraq and Syria. And we also knew how
over that territory where if you eject it,
right,
and you're floating down, your little 38 revolver or 9mm that they issue you is not going to do much good.
It's not going to do any good. No.
The funny thing about guns, they always, when you're going to combat, they have to issue you your weapon, right? And they're so worried about you, they have to control the weapon. They're more worried about that dang weapon than they are about a nuke, I think,
They totally are. Yeah.
So
check it twice,
Before we knew we were going to go get deployed to Desert Storm, and so one of my buddies was a firearms dealer, had the firearms dealership license. Yep. And so my entire crew went to him and we ordered guns because I was at KI Sawyer Air Force Base in Michigan, up the upper peninsula, and they weren't going to, they had to defend the northern tier. They weren't going to give us the best weapons they had in the gun locker, right? So we're going to get 38 revolvers, and so we all ordered a gun, and I got me a 1991 A1 45 ACP, but my navigator got this Dirty Harry 38 special, not 38, but whatever, the 357 Magnum.
Yep.
This thing was a cannon, okay? and they made you put them in these green boxes and put a seal on it. And so we put all our weapons in. We barely fit the navigator's gun in there. And anyway, we get to Diego Garcia, and the life support guy has to open up the weapons, and check them in. And he pulls that thing out, and he goes, that 357 goes, "This is not Air Force issue." Anyway.
See, the shenanigans with pilots, they're nonstop.
Yeah, and of course it's on British island territory, British country, and you're bringing a
Don't know how the
357 in.
Brits, they probably shoot left-handed.
Yes, we didn't. Basically, we got the life support guy not to say anything, and so we just put it down as a 38 special.
Proceed.
Yes, proceed. But I remember flying with a pistol in my right. The flight suits were the best outfit you could ever wear.
Sure.
And you had pockets down there by your leg, and that's where I kept my pistol.
We had to wear a G suit, and you could holster it here, which is where I chose to, and then you had the parachute straps that you would strap into the jet on that would kind of just barely fit on the side of it without being too much of a nuisance.
I always worried about ejecting and breaking my leg, but with that thing in my pocket, I think it's kind of heavy gun.
Yeah.
But when we were deployed, we didn't know, what kind of, I didn't know what AAA was. AAA is anti-aircraft artillery. I didn't know anything about, what it would really be like. I mean, they teach you in at Castle Air Force Base, which is our formal training unit, the jink for AAA and all this kind of stuff, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. When we flew through Guam to get to Diego Garcia, and in Guam, this old life support guy comes out and goes, "Hey, you want some old flak jackets?" And he had these flak jackets from Vietnam, and they were this gigantic thing. So I got like 3 of them, and so whenever I flew, I would line my flak jackets around
On the side of you?
Yeah, on the side of it, because I didn't know what the heck's going to happen.
You didn't want bullets coming up into the cockpit.
No, sir, did not want them. But it was kind of funny. I had all these flak jackets around my ejection seat.
Wow.
But my first combat sortie was kind of scary because we got hit. Bombers fly. Fighters go out generally where you do 4 ships and you split up into 2 ships. Bombers can fly in large formations, and generally what we did, the B-52 sorties, you would fly in 1 mile trail stacked up 500 feet. So you can just imagine these planes. And that's kind of like your package. And my first sortie into Iraq, I was a 6 ship. And since I was the brand new guy, I was number 6, right? And when you're the number 6 bomber, it sucks because the first guy wakes him up, 2, 3, 4, and 5 make them really mad. And by the time they get to 6, they figured out, okay, I need to shoot that way.
Right. They've got it figured out by the time you get there.
Right. And so we're, and of course, in a B-52, back in those days, we weren't using JDAMs or JSOWs or, the smart
GPS
weapons.
guided, yeah.
Yeah, we were using iron bombs. And by the time we got there, they'd run out of all the fancy iron bombs. So we were like Mark 82s, which is the 500-pound dumb bomb, M117s, which is a 750-pound bomb. And a B-52 drops things in football fields. So you decide, do you want to compress all your bombs into 1 football field or stretch it out to 3?
Multiple.
Yeah. And so what you do is you take these football fields and you cross them and you make all these, these patterns. So you go to a central point and then all of you split up and you go to separate, what they call initial points for your bomb run. And once you're on your bomb run, you can't move. You got to go straight. And we were flying these old G models built in 1957, 58, and 59. Wow. Old things. And I think they knew, the military knew they were going to retire them after the war. So we didn't really care about, ops limits.
Yeah.
And once you got over Baghdad, the max speed of a B-52, I remember this, is 390 knots. We'd be going 420. It was basically our motto for a squadron was drop them anywhere and get the hell out. Yeah. Because, you're flying 488,000 pounds of aluminum, and you're a big target. Even though you have, jammers and stuff like that can jam like, SA-2s and 3s and stuff like that, which those are the early SAMs from the Soviet Union. You didn't know if that crap worked very well. And of course, this is 1991. This is before AI, right? And anyway, we're on the bomb run, and right before our bombs went out, we're bombing a weapons storage facility. And on the news the next day, it came out that it was the baby milk factory.
Oh, gosh.
But that was the
propaganda.
Yeah, it's Baghdad Bob.
Yeah.
And, of course, we didn't have Fox News, man. It was just CNN. So everything was on CNN. And anyway, right before we dropped our bombs, we had been getting indications that an SA-3 was, locking onto us, and we were trying to knock it off. And the ECM of the B-52 back then wasn't that good against an SA-3. And my electronic warfare officers back there screaming and yelling and stuff, and all of a sudden, kaboom! And the airplane, the tail of the airplane drops up like this, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be on CNN, I'm sorry, I bombed the peaceful people of Iraq. Yeah. And we dropped the bombs. It came back down. We dropped the bombs, and we turned immediately south toward Saudi Arabia, and we pushed the power up. And I start looking around the cockpit because I'm the co-pilot. The pilot's like over there, just
trying to figure out what happened.
And I'm like, and you have like 8 engines, so you have 8 stacks of stuff. So you're like, I'm with my finger, I'm doing this, and of course you're wearing night vision goggles, and the night vision goggles have all this AAA going everywhere, and you're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? The only thing I found that was wrong with the airplane was the aft body fuel tank was empty, and so I assumed that, well, I guess they punched a hole in the aft body fuel tank, and so then I start looking at the fuel use curves, because we had to pre-plan these things, and we're right on the curve. So we didn't. So the aft body tank just decided to go empty right over the target, just like they, it always goes empty in the middle of the mission. But we got back, and I got out of the airplane as fast as I could, trying to find a hole. Didn't have a hole. And the best I can tell happened to us. We got the concussion of an SA-3. It just didn't break anything. So
wow, you got lucky.
Got lucky. Yeah. Very lucky.
Because if that thing would have fused on your airplane, it would have been bad news.
Well, B-52 can take a lot of hits. I mean, we had one guy, we had a staff. You know how staff rides. They got to get their combat sortie in. We had a staff crew take off, and they were bombing Kuwait, and they were trying to get, the time over target's very important, right? They had slowed to like 220 knots to get the exact time over target.
Oh my gosh.
By the middle of the war, they said, the hell with the time over target, just get there within a 10-minute window, right? So you'd be able to haul ass and go through the target areas. But these guys, they were going to be time over target.
Way slow over target.
And they got hit by 2 SA-2s. And the thing was just a leaking sieve of fuel. They landed at Jeddah, barely.
Wow.
And they all got DFCs.
Oh, man. Yeah, for being dumb.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, the first sortie was first combat sortie in Iraq was pretty uneventful. Dropped some weapons, but I'll back up. I was flying the F-22, which is mostly an air-to-air weapon system. I mean, that's really what it was designed for. Kind of like a tanker.
Yeah, just goes up, bores holes in the sky.
We're the ones that are protecting you guys when you go in. You don't know it, but you think about what happened in Iran. The F-22s were the first ones in,
right?
And they're escorting the bombers. The bombers are the most important to get the weapons down on target, but we were the ones that are protecting against the air-to-air.
Interesting thing about the air-to-air and air-to-ground, back in those days, back in Desert Storm days, we had F-4G Wild Weasels, and they were always named after beer. And I remember on that sortie I was telling you about, our beer guys were ham. You ever heard of ham beer?
I've never heard of ham beer.
It was ham beer. And then we had
serve it at your bar.
And we had a 4-ship of F-15Cs that were flying high cap for the whole sortie.
So that's what I started in. My first aircraft was the F-15C.
Right.
We learned a lot of lessons from Vietnam, and then by Desert Storm, the F-15s had really, I wouldn't say perfected, but I mean, when you look at their air-to-air kill record, it is still
100%.
104 to 0. So they've shot down 104
That's the
enemies.
F-15C.
The F-15C, which I flew, and 0.
Which, by the way, the F-15C is called the Albino C or Albino Eagle.
We never called it that.
You never called the Albino? Is that a bomber thing?
Yeah, that's got to be a bomber thing. But back to flying in Iraq and Syria. The interesting thing about when we were flying there is that we were targeting ISIS, but the Iranians had their militia groups that were in the middle of, and what were those guys doing? They were delivering weapons from Iran to Lebanon,
right?
That were eventually used.
The Hezbollah.
Yeah, by Hezbollah and also, in Gaza and places like that. So that was all going on. So we were fighting ISIS. The Iranians were fighting their way through, and they didn't like ISIS either, but they also didn't like some of the other groups. You had the Turks that had the PKK, which is a kind of a terror group in Turkey that a bunch of people didn't like them. Then you had the Syrian civil war. Remember, this was Bashar al-Assad,
Right.
who was horrible to his people, and the Russians were flying there. So the F-22, yes, we were dropping weapons. We dropped the Mark 82, the 500-pounders. They upgraded them to GPS weapons.
They put little fins on them. Yeah.
They put fins on them. We had 250-pounders as well. But it was super useful to have the F-22s at this stage where the Russians were really trying to just cause chaos. So when we would go in deep into Syria, the Russians were helping Bashar al-Assad suppress the civil war that was going on, because they were trying to overthrow. Eventually, they did.
Right.
Recently. But you would see these advanced Russian aircraft. We weren't at war with Russia, but they were always flying in the middle of the areas that we were operating. Always.
Like the MiG-31?
We had MiG-23s, MiG-25s, MiG-31s, Su-30s, Su-35s, all of these aircraft.
You remember at the very beginning of the Ukrainian war, there was a wreckage. I think it was a MiG-31.
Probably.
And it had a 2015 looking era Garmin receiver.
Yeah.
On the dashboard.
Yeah.
Like Velcro there.
Yeah, that's right.
So they didn't have any way. I mean, if they're using Garmin receivers to bomb.
Yep.
I mean,
That's exactly right. One story that I'll tell you is I was there in the summer, and one of the biggest missions I flew on was a July 4th mission. And in northern Iraq, Mosul was being overrun. Baghdad was almost overrun by ISIS. Mosul was almost completely overrun.
And that's a town north of Baghdad.
It's way north. It's on the border. It's a ancient city on the Tigris River, just to the south of the Turkish border. And there was just so much activity down there. I mean, the civilians were being slaughtered by ISIS on a daily basis. So there was a mass exodus. Remember, they had this very ancient mosque there with this minaret that went up 400 or 500 feet in the air, and ISIS destroyed it. I mean, this was like a 1,000-year-old building.
Yeah, why not? They were destroying everything else.
They destroyed everything. So on the 4th of July, I got a chance to lead a mission, and that was about a month into flying combat missions there. And, time on target was very important. And we probably had 30 aircraft that were targeting a weapons factory, like you said.
Right.
But it had been taken over. It was a manufacturing factory originally. It had been taken over by ISIS, and they were doing all sorts of stuff inside this factory. None of the civilian jobs existed anymore. They took it over, and they were famous for doing this. So we had guys coming in from all different directions.
In the bomber world, they call that multi-axis of attack.
The fighter guys just, we're just happy to be there.
I'm going to clear.
Yeah. But we had a 10-second time on target.
Okay.
And it was 40,000 pounds of which we had F-22s, F-18s, F-16s, Strike Eagles, F-15Es. There were a lot of different weapon systems, but they were all fighters.
Right.
And I don't think we had any bombers on this particular night. Dropping 40,000 pounds, which is a lot of weaponry.
Yeah.
But I was very proud as a fighter guy that our time on target was exactly on target. We didn't have to slow down.
Yeah. You had to slow down to 220 knots.
But I'll never forget two things. Number one, just seeing the weapons factory destroyed, and knowing that a lot of the civilians that were in that area would be safer now because ISIS was caught. I mean, they were just ravaging the neighborhoods. And then number two, just to the south of Mosul, in between Baghdad and Mosul, you had a prolific oil producing region. And what ISIS had done is they had once again lit all of these oil wells on fire.
Like they did at the end of Desert Storm.
Like they did at the end of Desert Storm. Yeah. And they had put out the fires, but on the MVGs, you could see the hot flow of oil that was still
on fire.
It was still hot and burning, and at night it gave off this just like iridescent glow, that was just totally unmistakable. But it was near Kirkuk, and I just thought, for a country that depends on this, for everything, for their wealth,
they're going to be poor for the rest of their lives, and they keep doing this stuff.
And for people, for people that were born there, raised there, and have become radical ideologists to burn the only resource that is really producing any sort of an economy for them.
Right.
This is the kind of people they are, and that memory will stick with me forever.
And when I got back from, when I was at Laughlin, and I was a writer back then, back in the late 2000s. I interviewed a staff sergeant who was a TAC P. Those are the guys that ride along with the Army and call in the 9 lines.
Yep.
And basically give the coordinates of where to strike. And he had been blown up by some IEDs. He was injured very, very badly, and he gave a presentation at Laughlin Air Force Base at the Anderson Hall there. And I talked to him afterwards, and he talked about how the Muslims in the Middle East, our enemy combatants, particularly in Afghanistan, they just hate us. There's no crossing any type of reconciliation.
Yeah. They're
just going to hate us no matter what. And he said, "There's no hope." That's what he was saying. There's no hope.
I didn't fight in Afghanistan because they didn't have any aircraft there. So our airplane, I never.
Well, you don't have enough gas to fly over Pakistan.
We had plenty of gas. We had lots of tankers that would help us, but that was a different fight. And I think what we're seeing right now is there is this very anti-Semitic, anti-Western. Mentality that it hasn't gone away.
Yeah,
and
it hasn't.
And
it's
there's
like
still a desire.
I feel like the devil created this. There can't be this much hate created by a human being.
But there's no regard for life at all.
I believe
they don't care about people on their side that died. They certainly don't care about people that they are actively trying to kill, and especially in these situations, they want to make it as painful and as public as possible.
Right. All right. So we talked about what it was like back in high school or middle school to decide you're going to be an Air Force pilot.
Right.
Because you have to decide you're going to be an Air Force pilot, and if you're going to do that, here's my first tip. I'm going to give the first tip. Do not settle for anything else.
Yeah.
Don't settle for being a navigator. Don't settle for I'll be an engineer. Just say I'm going to be a pilot,
right? Because
it's so hard to get through all the hurdles that you got to know that's your goal, and don't let anything get in your way. I mean, don't let physicals get in your way. Don't let you get a bad grade, you just come back and make a better grade the next time. You don't let any hurdle get in your way, because if you settle for something less than being a pilot, you're not going to be there.
I agree, and I obviously give nominations to the service academies, and that's one aspect of it. But there's many different ways to get there, but some of the best pilots that I flew with, their grades in school maybe not the best.
Well, yeah, once you get into college, you got to just get a 2.0.
Yeah,
2.0 to go.
But the thing that they had in spades above other people was they never quit.
Right.
They just had a grit that they stayed with it. They tried harder the next time, just like you said. You've got to pass, so figure out a way to pass.
Right.
And get back and study and do what you need to do to learn the material. But physically, I saw guys that couldn't do one pull-up.
Right.
And they just went and practiced, and they figured it out how to pass the test, which required like 10 pull-ups.
Right. I think it's also important in high school, particularly, to get involved in athletics. Even if you're not on the football team, run track or play tennis or do something. Get into athletics, because the athletics give you the stamina, your brain, the stamina. It's not, also it keeps you in shape, but your brain needs the stamina, because I think pilot training probably was the biggest mind trick in the world. I mean, getting through pilot training, and it's 52 weeks of hell. That's why I looked at it, because I was so tired of studying by then, weren't you?
It's physically demanding, it's mentally demanding, it's emotional. You have one bad ride. You go out and fly and you mess something up and you think it's all over, but you got to come back ready to go the next day, and you got to pass. And you can't, remember the mistakes, learn from them, and do better, and don't make the same mistake twice.
So pilot training for me, the reason I fly bombers is because I didn't want to get faped. And so I begged them, do not, faping is first assignment instructor pilot, where you have to fly, in my day it was T-37s or T-38s, probably yours too. I don't think they had T-6s by then. But I didn't want to get faped, but I wanted to fly combat. So I'm the only guy that asked for a B-52. Just give me a B-52, right? And I'll figure it out later. And but I had trouble in pilot training with the mid-phase of the T-37, the very first check ride. And it wasn't that I couldn't fly. It was just I was just nervous as heck about being evaluated all the time, because everything you do in pilot training, you're getting evaluated. There's someone with a freaking clipboard writing stuff down about you. And I don't know, I didn't like that. And it took me through mid-phase. And and by the way, when I went through pilot training, you'd start with 60 people in your class and you end with 20.
Oh, wow.
So 2/3 would get washed out. This is the Reagan buildup. That's how they did it. That was their way to do it. I was instructor pilot at Laughlin later, and they changed it. They said, if we're going to invest $500,000 in T-37 or T-6 training, then we want to at least give this guy a fighting chance. So now your classes are smaller, and they generally I think I washed out 2 people as a flight commander over 4 years. But back in my day, 2/3 of your class, you'd start with 60 people, end with 20. And I get to my mid-phase, and everyone that's gone through mid-phase check ride has washed out. And so I'm like, I can't wash out. And it's that mentality that you have to build through the athletics and through how you carry yourself in high school and college, that gets you through that.
I agree.
And it got me through that. I walked in after my mid-phase check ride, after passing they had 88 rides and 89 rides. Remember, they gave you 2 chances after you failed the first one. And I got a standing ovation from my class. And I was the last guy getting through mid-phase, and I made it through.
They were proud of you.
Yeah, I was so happy about that. And that was probably, I got an award out of T-37, the Flight Commander's Award, for how hard I worked. I worked my butt off to get through that. But I wasn't natural. Some people are natural with flying, I remember some of the guys in my class, they were just, I thought they were better than the instructor pilots sometimes, But I wasn't a natural, had to work at it.
I remember, going through Laughlin as well in Del Rio. Had a great T-37 experience. Was the first 6 months. My navigational skills were suspect, but I could fly.
Right.
I had the hands and the hand-eye coordination. So I had to learn the navigational skills. But because I did pretty well in that phase, then they put me with an exchange pilot, a Jordanian exchange pilot.
Was his name Obadat?
I can't remember his name, but but I didn't understand him. And his instruction was not near as good as American instructor pilots.
Right.
But I was at the top of the class going out of that first phase, and they set me with him, in T-38s.
Right.
So needless to say, I had a little bit of a rough start in T-38s because we just didn't click, and his instructional style was much different than
of course,
tried and true American instructors. Don't ever think that the American military is bested by anybody. We're not. We learn our lessons. We know how to instruct.
Right.
Our military professionals teach the next generation the lessons they learned, and we're always sharpening. That was a lesson that I learned right there.
When I was an instructor pilot at Laughlin, one thing I remember about your group, your class group, you guys, when y'all got out, you were going to go to war.
Yeah.
When I went through, it was still the Cold War. We all had a lot of questions. We'd lost Vietnam. All the leadership was Vietnam era guys who say, they made us flight plans with Baghdad Center. That kind of, not Baghdad Center.
Hanoi.
Yeah, Hanoi Center.
Wherever.
Yeah. And I was like, we thought we would never go to war. So it was not as focused as I saw with your class groups. Your class groups, you guys knew we're going to go.
Joe, I started in August of 2000. And then pilot training ended September, the 3rd week of September in 2001. So
right after 9/11.
When we were selected, they call it drop night.
Right.
When we were selected to fly a certain aircraft, that particular night was 3 days after September 11th.
Yeah.
So.
And I was down there at Laughlin when September 11th happened. I remember we had airplanes all over the country, and we had to go fetch them.
Had to go get them back because they had a flight ban on everything.
Yeah, the thing that they used to do is called Skatana. I don't know, it's probably a secret. I probably can't talk about it. But I just remember Skatana. And every briefing of a B-52 sortie, the electronic warfare officer had to open up this red classified book and brief us on Skatana, where they're going to shut down all the TACANs and the VORs and the DMEs and everything, and how we were supposed to respond.
Don't give away any classified information.
But that happened.
We use GPS now, so I think you're good.
I was like, this will never happen, and it actually happened.
They shut it down.
They shut down. Skatana went into operation and shut everything down. I remember they did I was with the 87th well, I was in the 96. I was the reserve instructor pilot back then when 9/11 happened. I remember they did like 3 recalls to find out where everybody was, you know.
Wow.
And I was thinking, man, they're trying to destroy our country, you know. And after that, it was fights on. Everything was fights on.
Right. Everything was.
And realized that leading up to 9/11, we'd basically been at war in Iraq since Desert Storm. And a lot of people don't realize that when you hear people say, well, the Iraq war was a mistake. Well, we were fighting. I mean, they were shooting at U-2s, and we had the North Fly Zone, the South Fly Zone, Southern Fly Zone, Southern Watch, whatever it was called. They were shooting at us constantly. And when I was active duty, I deployed more during the 90s. Every time Saddam kicked the weapons inspectors
You were out.
it was usually Thanksgiving. And they call us up, say, hey, you know, Major Hyde, report to the command post tomorrow morning at 0600. And I remember the day that Bill Clinton said, I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, right? The next day, or they called us in, they put us into crew rest, and they called us in the next morning. And I showed up this is at Barksdale, and I was like number 3 in this 14 ship cruise missile carriers. You know, the B-52 by this time had what they call CALCMs, which is conventional air-launched cruise missiles. And they had a 1,500 mile range, something like that. And we would fly up the middle of the Persian Gulf and launch these cruise missiles. And they came off these little rotary launchers in the bomb bay. So you open the bomb bay up, this little rotary launcher, and shoot off a missile, And so we had these launch boxes. We had to fly in, and you get to the top, you shoot off your 8 missiles, and you turn. And we were worried about Iran because they had SA-5s, which is a
big long range
missile. But I always heard it had rusty rails, so we weren't that worried about it.
You're going to be okay.
But they launched us on this sortie, and we had to fly backwards across. We couldn't go through the Middle East. We couldn't go down the Med. We had to go the Pacific route.
Oh wow!
3 air refuelings. The sortie was like a 38-hour sortie.
Oh my gosh!
And anyway, we got halfway there, and they called it off. You know, but then we recovered to Diego Garcia. I'm the only instructor pilot that's left, and I'm stuck there for a year.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, what a year? I think I got out there about 6 months afterwards. But I mean, we were at war with Iraq for the entire
That's
time.
one thing that the Army and the Navy gets it, I think, mostly. But you know, a lot of the Army they don't realize how many deployments airmen went through.
Right.
Constantly from 1990, and it really hadn't stopped.
No, it hadn't stopped at all. And I'm sure they have better systems they did back then because we didn't have any systems.
But we still, guys are still deploying right now, to the Middle East.
Well, we think about right now, you got the build up for Iran. That's a massive build up, I'm sure.
I'll tell you one more war story. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, remember the red line of the chemical weapons? I was talking about Syria earlier, and Bashar al-Assad.
This was Obama's red line.
This was Obama, and I started off with Obama being president when I was deployed in 2016, and then in the beginning of 2017, President Trump took over. But Bashar al-Assad had used chemical weapons against Syrians, against civilians, his own people, to kill them. And President Obama, famously said, "Well, I have a red line." Well, he didn't do anything. He did nothing in retaliation. So they tested President Trump early on, and they did the same thing in early 2017. And I'll never forget it. Was halfway through the deployment, and it was an immediate difference because we all knew that, if something happened, we were fairly certain Obama wouldn't do much.
Right.
But when President Trump came in and they used those chemical weapons, I'm telling you, we knew immediately that this guy was serious because we went into a planning state that I had not seen yet. And we started planning our response because we were not at war with Syria. We were there for ISIS. But we started planning a response to Bashar al-Assad, and it was very serious. So flying in those 2 days of missions in response to using chemical weapons, one thing that sticks out to me is we told the Russians, we said, do not fly your aircraft. Do not fly a single aircraft in this country. And we also told the Syrians, we said, if you fly your aircraft, we will shoot them down. So it was weird being one of only 2 aircraft in the entire country of Syria.
After all those months of just having to dodge.
Yeah, the Russians
Russians
are flying through when we're on a bombing run against ISIS. The Syrians are using their aircraft. I mean, you could see, I could use my NVGs and I could see a civil war happening 100 miles over there. We're working in this area.
Yeah.
They're in the west, over in Damascus or somewhere.
Right.
And I mean, the AAA, all the artillery. I mean, it was a war that was going on. You could see it happening.
Yeah.
All of that stopped.
Wow.
And it was very, very weird. But I'll never forget, we had special ops folks that were on the ground, and they were fighting against ISIS, and our command and control wanted me to go home. They said, the tanker's here, you guys need to go. Well, I had just gotten a call from one of the special ops guys on the ground that said, no, we need your help right now. So, this is why when people say, oh, we'll never have pilots again, no, we will still have pilots. They'll still be flying aircraft,
Right. You might have some drones.
You'll
out
have
there
some drones with
yeah.
you, but
Yeah.
but it's this example where they said, the command and control folks wanted me to go home, and I said absolutely not. I'm not going to leave Americans on the ground that are asking for our help.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it puts us into a bad fuel state, bring the tanker closer to us. We're still going to go help those guys out, which we did, and they later called us and said thank you because they had gotten denied, from several levels up the chain, but witnessing what America can do, and when we come together and bring nations together, that was one event right there where we sent a very clear signal to the president of Syria. And I'm pretty convinced too that was kind of the start of the downfall of the regime.
Mm-hmm.
We punched back and said, no more. You're not going to target your own people with chemical weapons. And it made me proud to be an American on that day.
You always wonder what's not talking politics, but Iran, you hear about massacres of the demonstrators and what this administration will do. I mean, and you always think about those guys that are over there and what they're going to have to go through.
Well, I'll tell you, and you went to A&M, I went to the Air Force Academy. They say that war is an extension of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing that play out around the world right now. We don't want to use our military. We don't want to be in endless wars. I don't want to be in endless conflict with our sons and daughters being exposed, but you also want people to know that you're serious, and that if it comes to that point, that if the threat gets to the point where our nation, our people, our interests are threatened that bad, that we will use it if we have to. And I think for a while we didn't get that. I could talk war stories all day, Joe.
Back to pilot training. One more thing, in case someone's watching wants to be a pilot, right? What do you think the skill is, the number one skill as far as flying that you got to learn or be good at to be able to get through pilot training?
I think on the hand-eye coordination, you have to have a certain level of hand-eye coordination, but you really can teach that. I do. I think you can. I think it's being able to anticipate. I think it's a mental skill more than anything.
So think ahead of the jet.
You got to be able to think ahead. You got to be able to think what if and then how to react. Some of that is natural. Most of it is not. Mm-hmm. Most of it is
chair flying. Remember chair flying?
Yeah, because you chair fly because it's
and chair flying is sitting in
well-known.
front of a poster of the instrument thing, and you hold a fake stick and you go through your head through the checklist, through the fuel calculations, things like that. So when you're flying, it's second nature to you.
When you get into a situation where you get your prefrontal cortex is flooded, this is psychology now.
Mm-hmm.
Then you fall back on habits. And if those habits are not well established, or if they're bad, or if they're incorrect, then you can't get through it. So in order to calm yourself down and have the right reaction, you have to practice. But you have to stay ahead of the jet and always be thinking. And I think anticipating, what if I have to turn here? What if this guy, does it look like we're going to have a collision here? Or, you can have 1,000 different situations here, but that's my opinion, is that the anticipation and thinking ahead and being able to know physically what you're doing with the throttle, what you're doing with the stick, and how the jets, I'll give you this acronym: perception, decision, execution. What do you perceive?
Mm-hmm.
That then translates to what's the decision you make based on what you see, which then you have to execute it, which is the physical part of flying. But those first two, if you don't see it correctly, or if you don't choose the course of action correctly, then it doesn't matter how you execute. You're off.
Well, after thousands of hours flying in Air Training Command or Air Education and Training Command, I was T-38 IP, I think building on what you're saying, the most important thing you can learn or think about going into pilot training is how to manage the energy of the mission. So when I say that, when you're high, you have a lot of potential energy, but not much kinetic energy because to get up there, you have to slow down. So if you can, or if you're low, you need to have a lot of kinetic energy, a lot of airspeed, so you can get back up high. So the guys who can manage their energy, which means they got to think ahead.
Right.
They got to think ahead of the jet and constantly be thinking, all right, I'm coming up on the border of the working area. I got to turn back that way. You got to be thinking about that turn, 30 miles before you get there,
That's right.
But the guys who can manage their energy on a sortie are the ones that graduate at the top
That's
of their
right.
class.
You got to be able to plan ahead and have that energy, whatever type you need, at the right moment.
That's exactly right. Anyway,
This is great.
This has been fun, man. I hope you guys enjoyed the fighter pilot, bomber pilot stories of Congressman August Pfluger, and I'm Joe Hyde with San Angelo Live. I was the bomber guy. He was the fighter guy. Air Force Academy, Aggie. If you guys are interested in any of that stuff, reach out to Congressman Pfluger's office. Tell him you're interested in going to the Air Force Academy. I don't know if you help people get an A&M, but
Well, we help anybody who has an interest in serving in the military.
that's right. And the idea with this was to let people, if your kid is thinking about joining the military, we wanted to, kind of talk about this and talk about our experiences. I wouldn't trade the experiences I got in the Air Force for anything in the world.
I totally agree. And now as I approach my retirement as a reserve officer, I look back on it, and it taught me a lot of the lessons that are important for the job that I have now.
Yeah, me too. And the biggest one is work hard and perseverance,
Yep.
and be highly competitive. I mean, to do what we're doing, you have to be highly competitive. But anyway, we'll see you next time.
Into the weather, the temperatures seem to have leveled off. Right now it's 53 degrees outside, and the low tonight drops to 28. Tomorrow will be mostly sunny out with a high of 58, and the low tomorrow night again will be 28.
On Friday, the high will be 56, and it'll be sunny out, and then Friday night, the low will be 21. Winds do top out tomorrow, that's Thursday, around 20 miles per hour, and then calm down after that. And there's no rain in the forecast for the coming weekend.
And we'll be right back after this word from Kano's Diamonds and Coins.
When it comes to unique pieces you can't find anywhere else, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is your one-stop shop. With over 24 years in the diamond and coin industry, Kano's Diamonds and Coins is West Texas's choice for diamonds, jewelry, coins, silver, and gold. Owner Bill Kano stands by his work and offers free consultations, including estate jewelry. Don't just trust anyone with your valuables. Come see the staff at Kano's at 1016 West Beauregard in San Angelo.
Don't forget, come out to it's open mic night at the ArcLight tonight, 441 Rio Concho Drive. Come on out and take the mic.
You will not see me taking the mic.
Thank you for watching the Light of the News Show.
The only locally owned news show in the Concho Valley.
Follow us on Facebook, X, and other social media platforms.
And download the San Angelo Live mobile app right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
For the live TV.